So welcome. We're here for our next edition of Small Talk, Big Issues. I have the enormous pleasure of having Etienne Tichit. Etienne is Corporate Vice President at Novo Nordisk and General Manager of France. He is one of the most innovative pharmaceutical executives that I know in the area of patient support. And I'd first like to thank you very much, Etienne, for joining us.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. So as you know, we have 3 questions for you, and I'm going to jump right in. So the first question, Novo Nordisk is, of course, the world leader in diabetes care. And over the last few years, we've seen more and more an array of connected devices, of apps, and so on to help diabetes patients. What do you think is still missing in terms of actual patient support?
As you say, Kevin, there is a lot of options right now for patients with diabetes. And for them, depending whether they're type 1 diabetes patients or type 2, solutions are quite different because needs are very different. When it comes to type 1, it's more control, more integration, and definitely the closed loop that we were envisioning with the use of pumps and sensors and so on is also taking place. Even if you don't go to a pump solution. So here it's a full integration for type 1, and it leads to new measures. So I would say that it's quite an enormous progress that has taken place, especially for type 1 patients. The challenge, I think, is more for type 2 patients, because that depends where you want to play, and whether you want to be more in the prevention area or basically in the late stage type 2 management. You will have different needs, different tools, and understanding the wish and the needs from patients is quite challenging, because it's a very heterogeneous group to start with, and as I mentioned, it depends where you want to intervene, prevention or late stage. So that means that there is a wide range of offering right now, lots of solutions that are existing. Sometimes, I would say pharma or even providers are thinking type 2 like type 1s, which might lead to a kind of over control, overdone solutions or overwhelming solutions. Whereas I really believe that there is an element of keeping it light and simple. So it's integrating in your life, but it's not taking over your life. And that's the challenge, finding a way basically for asymptomatic disease to be in a situation where you want to still enjoy life, and still manage your chronic disease. So, and that is evolving over time. So it has to be an incremental solution. So right now, I would say that there are lots of things, apps that are talking about food intake, calories intake, and so on. And on the other part of the spectrum, trying to go for the ideal solution. And in the middle, and possibly incremental solutions are not really there. So that's for self patient management. The other thing is the relationship between doctors and patients, and that I think there are huge opportunities, and you can put the doctors or HCPs in a kind of broader perspective. You can think that a diabetes patient is a cardiology patient. He is also he needs to be visited by also some other specialties, nephrologists, receiving nurses, and so on and so forth. So what is really missing is this possibility to interconnect as the patient wish, in order to have something which is flawless for him.
That raises a question. As we know, more than 2/3 of type 2 diabetes patients have some kind of chronic comorbidity. And from their perspective, very often patient support is not so much from the point of view only of diabetes, but from their overall health situation. Do you think that moving forward, digital patient support is going to have to be kind of holistic with respect to the comorbid patient, or is there still room for a diabetes-only program?
I have to say that it has to be holistic, but the challenge is how to make it incremental or stepwise. Because at the beginning of your diabetes, you don't have a cardio problem in many cases. At late stage, in many cases you have it. Same for renal function. It degrades over time. So the question is how to keep it light and supportive. If I think of a patient solution, how to keep it light and simple and supportive without bringing something that is overwhelming and maybe also discouraging. Because the other side of all these self-management system or remote management systems, they're great. At the same time, we think instead of what the patient thinks. So we design our solution based on what is best in class, rather than what is needed and what could be helpful and also at the end rewarding for the patient. It's maybe tricky to talk about reward with a chronic disease, but when you live with diabetes for all your life, you'd better have a way to get positive reinforcement along the way.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Recently, on Small Talk Big Issues, Paul Sims, the CEO of EyeFor Pharma, stated that he doubted that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole will end up actually playing a key role in providing digital patient support for a whole variety of reasons. He felt that pharma was going to have difficulty kind of making that digital transformation turn. What do you think?
Yeah, first, in pharma, we are well educated in developing drugs. So that requires a very thorough and very systematic approach to development. And here, you want a zero error, development. Whereas when you look at digital, the way of developing digital solutions is quite different. You start with I would call it a mock-up solution, and then it evolves over time, which is different to a drug. So in this respect, I would say that is quite right in the sense that our way of thinking is developing the absolute best solution from the start with kind of a zero default solution, zero error solution. Whereas when we talk about digital solutions, we always have the idea of developing incremental features and developing based on customer or patient's experience over time. So it might be right from a first fundamental reflection on how we develop drugs and versus digital solution. The other thing is also our capacity of our cycle of innovation and our capacity to innovate fast. And here the cycles are super short. And getting and receiving feedback and evolving the solution really fast is very different from I would say a very legal binded environment that we are in, or regulatory, not only legal. So I think he's right in the sense that we have a challenge ahead of us working in the pharma industry. If we want to play active role in the healthcare system, we definitely need in this digital space to speed up decision making, speed up also the testing, and allowing some space for having solutions that are evolving over time rather than having perfect solution from day one.
I never really thought of it that way, but I'm going to repeat that, Etienne, in general. I think that's an excellent point. You've talked here about how effectively pharma has a lot to do. And here's a fundamental question. You're the first major pharma executive that we've had on this series. And what do you think is the rationale for the pharmaceutical industry as a whole to actually invest in going beyond the pill and providing patient support? Why shouldn't pharma just remain doing the kind of research that you pointed out, just coming out with drugs, marketing them, and leaving the rest to payers or other people?
That's a very good question, because you can be tempted to think that's the flavor of the month thing. I definitely don't believe in that. It might be a good advertisement for a short period of time, but fundamentally, we are moving from being I would say, an industry to be a healthcare provider. And if we really believe in in our mission, beyond the treatment, we need to secure that these treatments are well taken at the right dose, sustained in terms of duration of treatment. And that's one part of the equation, making sure that patients, and we deliver the value that we have promised after the clinical development program. The second part is, and especially for chronic disease management, I think, one of the biggest challenge for the healthcare system in all countries is, being able to fund that. You can't decrease the number of diabetes patients. If I take this example, we might really can't decrease the flow of diabetes patients. So the cost is rising for the authorities, for the payers, and so on. So we also need to be part of the solution, and designing something which is sustainable. So for me, the addition of digital healthcare solution, when we talk about remote monitoring, remote management, remote surveillance, and so on, is a way to become more efficient. And when you look at the cost of diabetes, 90% of the cost of diabetes is infrastructure. The last 10% is drugs, roughly speaking, for Europe. So if you think of it, what are the way to intervene? Either you go to and shrink the price for the treatments, and then you keep innovation. So therefore, you don't have new solutions for patients for the long run. And the other thing, the other objective is basically to try to reduce this 90% of cost that is linked to the healthcare system. So how to find efficiencies in the healthcare system? For me, digital solutions are part of finding these efficiencies. So to me, this is especially when you think of pharma. I think pharma needs, you can't go on all pathology and so on. For me, it's when you're dedicated, and like Novo, for example, 100 years almost in diabetes management, you design the best possible product. You evolve them according to the needs, and you try to remove side effects and so on. You want to make sure that you have some new solutions for patients to keep on going with the treatment, with the full value that is shown in clinical trials. That's one way of assisting them, with a digital solution. And the other thing is to help the authorities and partner with the authorities and with the healthcare system to improve the efficiency in the path of care. And that, to me, these are the two areas where I would consider that, when you have a strong legacy, a strong expertise in one disease area, then you have to engage in these two areas.
I have to say, I agree. I think that a company like Novo that has very strongly been associated with a certain pathology for that many years, and particularly in Europe, has the credibility and the experience, perhaps, to take the lead in this kind of thing. Because as you point out, treating diabetes is not just a chemical treatment, right? It's an overall thing. I have one last question for you, Etienne. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for many years, and right from the very start, you were always very focused on patient support. Perhaps before, and well before the, how should I say, the current fervor inside pharma for looking at beyond the pill and patient centricity. Was there something specifically for you? Was there a eureka moment that occurred for you where you said, we should be doing more in this area?
I think, we're all connected to what we do every day. And I think when you work in healthcare, you can say one thing is you're lucky to work in this environment, where there is science, there is technology, and so on. But the more important is that there are patients. And when these patients are your family members, when you're connected to their daily life. My dad was a diabetic patient with cardiovascular complications, renal complications, and even at the very end also some respiratory complications. So, and living in the countryside, you know, you're almost alone. You know, you're away from a very effective system. You know, I would call it system, which means that you have a GP doing his very best to make it work on the long run. You know, where most of the time you get taken by the helicopter. You know, even if it's only 100 kilometers away. So when you think of this, you know, and that's France. You know, basically. That's France. You know, most of the patients are not spending their time in big cities. You know, they're also all across France. So in this context, what are the resources that you provide to these people, to my father? You know, what are the resources for them? Of course, they might not be tech savvy from day one, but having a way basically to check if they're in control, to have a kind of direct line. To understand, you know, what can make a difference for them, where they can make a difference themselves, you know, beyond treatment, and also getting to know them even better. You know, my dad was chasing calories, and you know, every day, you know, he was having a dinner, and the day after, looking at the effect on his glycemia. So there are lots of things to for patients to handle and to learn. And to adjust and still willing to keep a normal life. So when you don't have a really good access, when you don't have multiple resources basically coming to you easily or available almost on the shelf, then you look for other solutions. And I strongly believe that with digital initiatives, this is the way to have it in your pocket anytime, access to a specialist. Sometimes not being in control, but be aware and improve over time. So I think it's also a good way, when you start to feel that there is a control, understanding, and then self-reflection, empowerment, and you're not judged by the doctor, but you can have an objective conversation. Then you have a right intervention, and hopefully around this, live a longer life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Etienne. I know that your time is well accounted for. You've just moved the entire Novo Nordisk organization in France to a new location, and furthermore in some kind of virtual way. So I know that it's got to be a tough job. And I'd really like to thank you for your time and for your insights.
You're welcome, Kevin. See you soon.